The night was a maelstrom of white, New Year's Eve, 1775, but there was no celebration, only the howling of a vicious blizzard. The wind screamed through the darkness, whipping snow into blinding sheets that erased the world beyond arm's reach. For the men outside Quebec City, every breath stung like needles, and the cold seemed to seep into their very bones. Snow and ice lashed down, blinding the American rebels outside Quebec City's stone walls. The storm was relentless, turning the ground to a treacherous frozen wasteland. Each step forward was a battle against the elements as much as against the enemy. Exhausted, half-frozen, and desperate, these men faced a gamble: capture Quebec, the heart of British Canada, and convince its people to join their revolution. Many had marched for weeks through wilderness, surviving on scraps, their clothes in tatters and faces raw from wind and frostbite. Now, with hope and fear mingling in their hearts, they prepared for the most dangerous night of their lives. Their commanders, General Richard Montgomery and Colonel Benedict Arnold, knew the odds were grim. Their army was a patchwork of sick, starving soldiers and volunteers. Their enlistment set to expire at midnight. The officers huddled over maps by flickering lantern light, voices hushed, weighing the risks of a desperate assault. They understood that hesitation meant disaster. If they didn't attack now, their force would vanish by morning. The blizzard, they hoped, would be their ally, masking their approach as they prepared to storm the city's formidable defenses. The storm that threatened to destroy them might also be their only chance for surprise. Inside Quebec, British Governor Sir Guy Carleton had prepared his defenses, his mixed force of regulars, sailors, and local militia on high alert. The city was a powder keg, waiting for a single spark. Carleton's men peered into the swirling snow, nerves taut, knowing an attack could come at any moment. On one side, a revolutionary army, driven by vision and facing collapse. On the other, a determined garrison defending a key outpost of the British Empire. The fate of the northern colonies, and perhaps the entire revolution, hung in the balance. The blizzard raged as the final hours of 1775 ticked away. American soldiers checked their muskets, wrapped rags to keep powder dry, and whispered final prayers. Some clutched tokens from home, others steeled themselves with silent resolve, knowing that dawn might never come for them. They were about to launch an attack that could change history, or doom them before dawn. In the storm's fury, every man knew he was gambling with his life and with the future of a revolution. Why risk so much for a frozen city? The answer: the American leaders saw Canada as the potential 14th colony. They believed French-speaking Canadians, under British rule for just over a decade, might join their fight for liberty. If Canada joined, the British would lose a crucial base, and the revolution's northern flank would be secure. The dream was a united continent, stretching from Florida to the Arctic. Capturing Quebec could trigger the fall of Montreal and the rest of Canada. The British would face a war on a massive front, their main stronghold gone. The political and psychological impact could have drawn in European support much earlier. A victory at Quebec would have transformed the rebellion into a continent-spanning war for independence. Had the Americans succeeded, North America's map and its history would look very different. The Battle of Quebec was a hinge point, the closest the dream of a continental republic ever came to reality. The American Revolution ignited with a series of passionate protests and tense skirmishes in the streets and fields of the colonies, as ordinary people rose up against British rule. In those early days, there was no grand plan to conquer distant lands like Canada, just a desperate fight for liberty and survival. But after the battles of Lexington and Concord, the Continental Congress quickly realized that their northern border was dangerously exposed to British attack. British-controlled Canada loomed as a potential launching point for a major invasion down Lake Champlain and the Hudson River, threatening to split the colonies in two and crush the revolution before it could truly begin. Faced with this looming threat, the Americans made a bold decision to go on the offensive, strike northward, and try to seize Canada, eliminating the danger at its source. Congress authorized a daring two-pronged invasion, a classic pincer movement designed to catch the British off guard and secure the northern frontier. General Richard Montgomery, a respected former British officer turned patriot, would lead the main force north from New York, aiming to capture Fort St. John's, then Montreal, and finally, the fortress city of Quebec. Montgomery's leadership and reputation were seen as crucial for winning over the local Canadian population and persuading them to join the revolutionary cause. Meanwhile, the second prong, led by the ambitious Colonel Benedict Arnold, would attempt a daring shortcut through the unforgiving Maine wilderness, braving rivers, swamps, and dense forests. Arnold's route was a brutal gamble, forcing his men to endure hunger, exhaustion, and the unknown dangers of uncharted territory, all for the hope of surprising the British. The hope was that Arnold's force would arrive unexpectedly, linking up with Montgomery's army for a coordinated assault on Quebec, catching the British defenders off guard. It was a plan born out of necessity, fueled by revolutionary zeal and the belief that bold action could change the course of history. The Americans, driven by hope and determination, truly believed they could achieve the impossible and inspire others to join their cause. The fate of the northern frontier, and perhaps the entire revolution itself, now hung in the balance, as the eyes of history watched and waited. Montgomery's journey north was conventional, but grueling. The march was a relentless test of endurance, as his men trudged through thick mud, icy rain, and the biting winds of the northern wilderness. Every step forward was a battle against exhaustion and the unforgiving elements. His 1,100 men besieged Fort St. John's for 45 days, enduring disease, cold, and hunger before the British finally surrendered. The camp became a place of misery, with men shivering in thin tents, plagued by fever and gnawing hunger yet refusing to give up hope. Montreal fell without a fight as Carleton, the British commander, fled to Quebec, leaving the city open to the Americans. The capture was swift, but the real challenge still lay ahead. Meanwhile, Arnold's 1,100 men faced a nightmare in the Maine wilderness. Their route was uncharted, the terrain brutal, and the weather grew colder with each passing day. Dragging heavy boats upstream, crossing endless swamps, and running out of food, they resorted to eating leather, candles, and even dogs. Hunger gnawed at their strength, and every mile became a struggle for survival. Dozens died from starvation and disease. Survival was a miracle. The forest floor became a graveyard for the unlucky, and the living pressed on, haunted by loss. Arnold's leadership kept the survivors moving, his determination inspiring hope when all seemed lost. At last, French-Canadian locals saved them with food and shelter, offering a lifeline just as despair threatened to overwhelm the men. By early November, about 600 emaciated soldiers reached the St. Lawrence, across from Quebec. Their journey had cost them dearly, but they had made it, barely. Too weak to attack alone, they waited anxiously for Montgomery, watching the fortified city across the river as winter crept in. In December, Montgomery arrived, bringing the combined American force to about 1,000. Spirits lifted as the two battered columns joined, but the odds were still daunting. They now faced a fortified city defended by 1,800 British regulars and militia, all well supplied and prepared for a siege. The defenders watched from behind thick walls, ready for any assault. Winter set in, and enlistments were about to expire. The men's clothing was in tatters, and supplies were running low. Time was running out, and morale was slipping. The Americans had to risk everything on a single, desperate attack. There would be no second chance. It was victory or disaster. The fate of the campaign, and perhaps the revolution itself, would be decided in a blizzard as men advanced through howling snow and darkness. The gamble was set, and the outcome would echo through history. The attack on December 31st in 1775 was a complex planned strike from two directions under cover of the blizzard. Montgomery would attack the southern defenses, Arnold the north. A third group would create a diversion. The plan required perfect timing, impossible in the blinding snow. Disaster struck immediately. Montgomery's column was hit by a deadly volley. He and his officers were killed. Leaderless, the Americans broke and fled. On the other side, Arnold's men captured the first barricade, but Arnold was shot in the leg. Captain Daniel Morgan took command, leading a charge that seized a second barricade. For a moment, victory seemed possible, but with Montgomery's force routed, Carleton shifted defenders to trap Morgan's men. Surrounded, outnumbered, and with wet gunpowder, Morgan was forced to surrender after hours of brutal fighting. The daring American attack on Quebec ended in catastrophic failure. The dream of a quick victory was buried in the snow. The Quebec campaign was a story of endurance and unexpected alliances. Arnold's starving men were saved by French-Canadian habitants who shared food and shelter despite being British subjects. The Americans tried to win hearts and minds with pamphlets promising liberty and religious freedom, but failed to spark a mass uprising. For a moment, the idea of a 14th colony felt real. Benedict Arnold's leadership and courage were legendary. His later betrayal makes his story all the more tragic. Captain Daniel Morgan's ferocity nearly turned the tide. His capture was a major blow. These men, and the soldiers who followed them, showed extraordinary courage and sacrifice. The campaign was more than strategy. It was a test of human spirit. Their stories remind us that history is shaped by individuals facing impossible odds. The defeat at Quebec was devastating. Of 1,000 Americans, over 400 were captured and dozens killed or wounded. Survivors, led by a wounded Arnold, endured a miserable winter siege before retreating in spring. Canada remained British, the dream of a 14th colony died. The failure shaped North America's future, ensuring two distinct nations. For the British, Canada became a vital base. For the Americans, the loss exposed weaknesses and forced hard lessons. Yet the campaign forged leaders. Arnold, Morgan, who would shape the war's outcome. The Quebec campaign was a crucible, testing the resolve of those who would lead the fight for independence. Even in failure, it defined the nation to come. The attack on Quebec was a bold gamble, driven by ambition and idealism. The leaders believed they could build a new nation from Florida to the Arctic. The battle is a reminder that history turns on small moments and chance. Had Quebec fallen, the map of North America might be unrecognizable. The defeat shattered the myth of inevitable victory and revealed the true scale of the challenge. Studying Quebec's failure deepens our appreciation for the resilience of the revolutionaries. It's a timeless story of courage, sacrifice, and the price of ambition. The echoes of that desperate charge in the snow still remind us. History is made by those willing to risk everything for a dream.